I'm Ramesh Ramachandran, and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. And I have with me a very special guest, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, India's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, to talk to you, the viewers, about India-Saudi Arabia ties, regional and global issues of interest or concern to both Saudi Arabia and India. Dr. Sayeed, welcome to DD India, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Right, and before I proceed any further, I want to inform you, the viewer, about the guest in question, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed. Now, Dr. Sayeed is a career diplomat. He has served as India's High Commissioner to Seychelles. He was Consul General of India in Chicago in the United States. He was Ambassador of India to Yemen and Consul General of India in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And he's published 3 books, 1 in geology and 2 on Indian art and culture. And he holds a Master of Science and a doctorate in geology from Osmania University in Hyderabad. He has an advanced diploma in Arabic from the American University in Cairo. And he is a competent Toastmaster to boot. Dr. Sayeed, thank you once again. And let's start with the obvious question first. The welfare of Indian nationals living and working in Saudi Arabia. What's the embassy or the government doing in collaboration with the Saudi authorities to take care of their interest insofar as repatriating them from the kingdom is concerned and other welfare activities at the same time?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramachandran. It's my pleasure to be on Doordarshan. To answer your question, in Saudi Arabia, as we speak, there are close to around 60,000 COVID positive cases and around 329 persons who passed away because of COVID. While the kingdom doesn't give us the country-wise, nationality-wise breakdown of positive cases, the rough indication is that around 70% of the cases involves the expatriates. So the number of those involved would be high. But a silver lining in Saudi Arabia is that the recovery rate has increased, and about nearly 32,000 people have recovered so far. Now, unfortunately, we have around 53 casualties among the Indians owing to COVID. Of course, the largest number is from UP, then followed by Kerala. So, but for that, I would say that the Saudi authorities have been very careful since the beginning, to combat the challenge of COVID. They started closing the mosques. They're closing the 2 main mosques, Mecca and Medina, very early, and then they provided. They opened up the healthcare system both to their nationals as well as the workers, residents equally. So they provided free treatment. So all those things were there on the part of the Saudi authorities. But when what we have done in the initial stages itself, we established linkages with various Indian community expatriate groups in different parts of the kingdom. Kingdom is a big country. Indian community is the largest community, expatriate community, with 26 lakhs Indians. So we established contacts, through all these groups. We established doctors group, and I personally, talked to most of these people in different cities. Almost 17, 18 cities we covered through video conferencing. Next, what we did is also the important challenge was to see the welfare of the Indian workers, whether they are doing well in their own camps or not. So what we did is that we identified around 100 top employers, Saudi employers of Indians, and then the community welfare wing of the Indian embassy started contacting them almost on a daily basis to get a feedback, on the conditions in the labor camps, what kind of social distancing is being maintained, and several things like that, so that whether adequate healthcare facilities and social distancing norms are, being followed or not.
So where are those corona positive cases today as we speak? Are they in a separate facility, and how is the embassy, coordinating with them, with these positive cases?
You see, most of these cases are spread all over, but then, major concentrations are in a few cities. A few cities like, in the western provinces, the cities would be Jeddah, Mecca, and Medina. Here it would be, the capital would be Riyadh, and then Dammam, and a few cities like that. Now, the the facilities, healthcare facilities of the kingdom are spread all over. And so many of these positive cases are put in quarantine by the Saudi authorities, and mostly in hotels. And what we have also done is that we also directly get feedback from the Indian community on our COVID. We have a COVID 24/7 COVID special COVID helpline. So on that we receive cases. So whenever we receive any feedback from the Indian diaspora that they're not feeling well or there are medical issues, we pass on this information to the Indian doctors special group which has been created. So they actually talk to the people, understand whether they are suffering from common cold or there are some indications of COVID. So accordingly, these people are guided. So these are some of the things which we are doing. And also, I think important thing here to mention is that there is a close coordination which the embassy has established with the Saudi authorities, mainly with the Ministry of Health, so that if there are issues of Indian community getting in touch with the ambulances or there's helplines or something, we intervene. Then again, our channels with the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Human Resource Development here and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In some cases, people have talked about shortage of food, especially in remote areas. So in that case, what we have done is that we have got in touch with major food suppliers, supplying chains, and then we provide them the lead and then say, okay, these are the addresses where the food needs to be delivered, and the food is delivered, and then we bear the cost to the Indian Community Welfare Fund, which is available. In some cases, people have talked about medicines. Wherever possible, through local procurement, we are providing assistance. So I think so far, this is the mechanism we are working. We are advising the people to remain calm, not to get panicky. Especially now the focus of the community has also shifted to repatriation efforts. So so the most of the calls are coming on that.
Right, I'll talk about repatriation just a bit, Ambassador, but a quick word from you, a quick comment from you on the 53 fatalities, Ambassador. Have their mortal remains been sent to India? You said they are from Uttar Pradesh and Kerala. So what's the status of their mortal remains as we speak?
Yes, out of the 53 cases, just to give a breakdown for your viewers, we have 12 from Uttar Pradesh, 9 from Maharashtra, 7 from Bihar, and 8 from Kerala, 7 from Telangana. Then there are people from Manipur, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, and Rajasthan. Now, as far as I know, in almost all the cases, the burial has been requested locally and has been done locally. So we haven't really received any request for COVID-related deaths to be repatriated to mortal remains to be repatriated to India. Although, of course, there are other mortal remains which are being repatriated, not related to COVID.
Dr. Saeed, let's talk a bit, if you will, about the repatriation exercise. Give us a sense of how many Indian nationals have been ferried back home in recent weeks, and how many more are likely to be brought home in the next few weeks as well.
We have registered around 83,000 people, as I mentioned to you.
Okay.
And out of these 83,000 people registered to be repatriated, mainly these are the 34%, as I mentioned, are the distressed workers, but there's a large segment of them who are here on a short-term visa, maybe for short projects relating to some companies' projects, or people, parents visiting or spouses visiting. We have about 26% of such cases. Then there are a large number of medical cases, around 21%.
Right.
And then there is a small number of people who are, who are students who are, stranded here. A few pilgrims who are stranded here, those who have come for Umrah. Majority of the cases, more than 52,000 people are from Kerala. So that's the biggest segment which we have, and then followed by Tamil Nadu, UP, and Telangana. So now, when this first phase was started, so far we had around 7 flights in the first phase in the last week which we had, and 2 flights added of the second phase completed also. And so together in these 7 flights, we had accommodated around 1,100 people so far. The operation continues. We do have 3 additional flights, and completely during the rest of the month, we have additional flights, which could cater to about cumulative number of about 2,100 people. So it's a huge task which is there. And we have major embarkation points spread out. We have in the capital Riyadh, which is there. Then you have in the oil-rich eastern province, where a large number of people working, so Dammam, and then of course the western province of Jeddah, where we also have the two holy mosques of Makkah and Medina. So the people who are stranded there. So generally, in the first phase, concentration had been to the southern destinations because of the numbers. It has to match the thing, but we did also have a flight to Delhi. In the coming months, in the coming weeks, the next week and so on, we would add other embarkation points for people to be transported back, especially to destinations in UK, in UP, and then you also would have Bihar and Maharashtra, Chennai, and so on and so forth. So this is a very integrated operation which is going on, where the embassy is in direct touch with the COVID cell of the ministry. Then we are also in touch with the state governments to ensure that the facilities are proper and all. One important thing relating to repatriation I would like to also mention to you is that when we have collected the data, we have also collected the data relating to their professions and their specialties. And this data, eventually, we will be also sharing with the state governments. The whole idea is that while the distressed workers have lost their jobs and they're looking forward to go back, but while they're in their own states, the state should find them useful because of their expertise and professional competency which they have. So eventually we hope that they would be rehabilitated either in India, and if situation improves, maybe they return back quite soon.
Right. Let's talk a bit now, Ambassador, about bilateral ties. How would you describe the bilateral ties as they exist today? And I have a long list of visits that have taken place in the last many years, starting with King Abdullah's visit to India in 2006, then the then Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia in 2010, the Crown Prince, who visited India who is now the King, who visited India in 2014, and then Prime Minister Modi's visits to Saudi Arabia in 2016 and 2019. So when we look back at the evolution of the ties, what are the key takeaways, the big takeaways from the India-Saudi relationship in the last few years?
You see, you're correct. There have been, very healthy exchange of high-level visits, on both sides, and of course, the most recent being the Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia in October 2019. This was, of course, a follow-up of the visit of Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman to India in February of 2019. See, when we take the last visit, one of the most important outcomes of this was the strategic partnership which was launched between India and Saudi Arabia. And this is the highest bilateral mechanism which has been launched between the two countries. Headed by the two top leaders of both countries, the Prime Minister on our end and the Crown Prince on the Saudi side. And then this would be the mechanism which would deal with all the issues which are there. We will dwell on this a little bit more. But then I would say that Saudi Arabia is a very important trading partner of India. We have it's the fourth largest trading partner. We have a bilateral trade of $34 billion. One silver lining in this, in all the negative, gloomy picture which we are hearing about the COVID-related impact, is that the Indian exports to Saudi Arabia in 2019 have registered a significant increase. According to the Saudi data, we had a 15% increase in Indian exports, which is around 800 million of Indian exports which have been increased. So I think this is important. And also for us, Saudi Arabia is a very dependable partner for our hydrocarbon needs. So it supplies around 80% of the crude oil requirement which we have. It also provides around 30% of our LPG requirements. So even in times where there was a heavy demand in India, last Diwali and Dussehra season, even in while the kingdom's facilities were they were subjected to drone attacks, terrorist attacks, they maintained this. So I think we have a relationship which goes to a long time. It was one of the earliest, one of the first countries with which India had established diplomatic relationship immediately after it became independent. Just a few months after we became independent, we established this relationship. So when I talked about the Prime Minister's visit, one of the outcomes was the Strategic Partnership Council, but there had been several other positive things which had happened. One was the almost a dozen agreements which were there, and you would see the range which is of these agreements covered renewable energy, defense, civil aviation, and then the Saudi government agreed, to participate in our strategic petroleum reserves. Then there were agreements between the stock exchanges, and and then the Rupee card was launched. So I think we have a wholesome relationship which is existing. And now 2020, as the kingdom is chairing the G20, our leadership has assured Saudi Arabia that India would do everything possible to make the G20 meaningful, so that we can, as countries, as G20 partners and as bilateral partners, work together with Saudi Arabia to find out, the ways and means of various challenges which the world faces now, including the impact of COVID.
Indeed. Let's talk a bit now, Ambassador, about India's exports to Saudi Arabia. We've spoken about Indian imports from Saudi Arabia. What about food security, for instance? I'm told that India is seen as a good source for Saudi Arabia in terms of importing rice or red meat or sugar, spices, infant milk powder. Is it in the short term, or are we looking at a more long-term, exports to Saudi Arabia in these sectors and other sectors as well?
When we talk about India's, overall economic partnership with Saudi Arabia, one, of course, is the trading aspect. And you rightly said that Saudi Arabia looks to India as for its food security, as we perhaps look to Saudi Arabia for our own energy security. So the biggest commodity which is exported from the food side is the basmati rice, and almost around 75% of the basmati rice which is consumed in Saudi Arabia is sourced from India. So, and then there are spices. The Saudis are very fond of Indian spices, especially cardamom. The Saudi kawa, which they drink in small cups. It is actually it's a combination of coffee as well as cardamom, and the cardamom which is preferred to go in that is the cardamom which is sourced from India, mainly from Kerala, and there are other products which you talked about. So the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is very keen to enhance this relationship. One, to see whether there could be a large-scale partnership, first in the form of taking equity stakes in Indian companies if it is possible, subject to our thing. So they have recently taken around 14 million stake in a rice company in India. They are also looking forward, to have partnerships in the SEZ, so that it is easy for them to procure and then then send supplies here. Then they are talking about taking stakes in red meats and many other products like that. There was also talk about possible collaboration between the state governments and federal government and state governments on our side and Saudi side on the agricultural side, is in terms of cropping. Can there be a contract farming done for the products which are specifically needed there? So it would provide some kind of stimulus to our industry. Sugar, for example, Saudi Arabia is one of the highest consumers of sugars, and then we find that there's a huge opportunity for Indian sugar industry there. So those kinds of partnership. But apart from this, I would like to mention to you is that Indian companies themselves have made a big foray into Saudi Arabia. As we talk, and not many people perhaps would be able to put it in its perspective, we have close to around 476 Indian companies which have invested in Saudi Arabia, cumulatively around $1.5 billion. And these are big companies, there are small companies, a mix of all companies which are there. So, and then when we talk about companies, we have majors like Tata's, we have Wipro, we have Mahindra, L&T, Shapoorji Pallonji, so many which are there. And they are there in different sectors, different segments: oil-related industry, construction-related industry. TCS is there in the executing projects in the IT side. Wipro is doing that. We are also, I think, into the education side in terms of the IT-related educational services. So one of the things which I would like to emphasize through your channel is that now with the COVID impact, it is understood that much of the work in Saudi Arabia relating to IT would be outsourced. Hitherto, the kingdom was, the companies were very comfortable where they wanted the companies to do on-site work in presence of them. Now, with the changing reality globally, there is an opportunity for the smaller companies also to play big in the Saudi sides because of this outsourcing. So I think this is one. Another area where we are doing pretty well is the automobile sector. As I mentioned already, we have the Tata Motors here, we have the Mahindra, we have the Ashok Leyland. So all these are doing well. Between January and March, we had almost around 400 vehicles being ordered through our companies, which of course which were in the different stages of delivery. Apart from the Indian companies, the large number of vehicles which are imported by Saudi Arabia through companies such as Ford, Hyundai and others, they are also being sourced from the manufacturing plants which are located in India. So I think there is a large interdependence. So it's one is the oil and gas, another is the food and trading, but the rest of this is also the industry part, the engineering part, so this kinds of collaboration. Last, I would like to mention about the startups. Saudi Arabia is providing a very good ecosystem now and a hand-holding for startups, and many of our Indian startups with their innovative ideas can find solutions to the issues which Saudi Arabia is looking forward to. One particular innovation which was demonstrated, technology which was demonstrated in India recently in Gujarat was producing water, potable water out of atmosphere, out of air. So such kinds of technologies, which India is definitely a technology, one of the technology hubs of the world. Maybe we can work together in this direction.
And finally, Ambassador Sayeed, I want to talk a bit about another important component of bilateral ties, and that's to do with the Hajj pilgrimage. Now, we saw the Hajj quota was increased last year, and that enabled 2 lakh Indians to perform Hajj in August 2019. What are you hearing from the Saudi government on the Hajj pilgrimage for this year?
You see, in the beginning, Saudi Arabia, in the very beginning of COVID, they stopped, the lesser pilgrimage, which is the Umrah pilgrimage, which is of course one of the biggest revenue providers. So, and the mosque remained closed, for the pilgrims. So it still remains closed for anybody from outside. Now, the decision relating to Hajj, whether Hajj should be carry forward or not, the kingdom should carry forward or not, has not been taken as yet. We are expecting a decision on this very shortly. Maybe towards the end of this month or something. But then I must also inform your viewers that there had been several instances in the historic Indian history where the Hajj pilgrimage was actually called off. One was due to the plague, and another time it was during the World War II. And situations like that, because public health is extremely important. People come for pilgrimage. There are almost 2.5 million people come to Saudi Arabia from more than from nearly 200 countries. So it's a challenge for any country when you have people coming from there in a pandemic situation to have a pilgrimage. So we are going to see a balancing which the Saudi authorities would need to do. Maybe there would be reduced numbers. I'm not too sure what will be there. But of course, last year we did bring 200,000 Indian pilgrims from India, which was the highest number ever handled by us. This was again thanks to the intervention of our Prime Minister with the Crown Prince, where the quota was increased by 25,000. So from 175 it went to 200,000. And this year also we were looking forward, our pilgrims are looking forward, Hajj pilgrims are looking forward to come here. And then from the arrangement side, we have made all arrangements. We're in the process of making the arrangements. So if the Saudi authorities decide to go ahead with the pilgrimage, we would have all the arrangements put in place. The embassy is working very closely with the Ministry of Minority Welfare as well as our Hajj Committee of India. But of course, we'll have to await the decision, which is a very important decision, which most of the pilgrims are eagerly looking forward to.
All right, on that note, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, thank you so much for making time to be on DD India and speak to our viewers about India, Saudi Arabia, bilateral, regional and global issues of interest or concern to both Saudi Arabia and India. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And that's a wrap on this special broadcast. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.